Tonight on Sharp End, is an election that looked like a Tory walkover turning into a real battle for number 10? Good evening. Opinion polls are, as we always say, only snapshots, but hopefully accurate pictures of where public opinion is at any moment. So 4 weeks ago, a Brexit election seemed to promise the Conservatives unprecedented support in Wales at this election. A fortnight later, that support was holding steady, but Labour was gaining ground with the smaller parties squeezed. And now Labour's ahead, but with remarkably strong support for the two biggest parties, less than 3 weeks from polling day. Of course, it's not just in Wales that Tory support has been slipping, but today Theresa May was here, warning her supporters that her gamble on an early election might not pay off.
The risk is real and the stakes are high. A loss of just 6 seats will cost my government our majority and create a hung parliament. Just 6 fewer MPs means a hung parliament in which the minor parties will flock to prop Jeremy Corbyn up. That will deliver nothing but chaos. It means Jeremy Corbyn, imposed as Prime Minister, propped up by the Lib Dems, Plaid Cymru and SNP, all of whom oppose the decision to leave the EU and want to fight to keep us in.
Plenty to talk about with my guests, who this week are Chris Davis for the Conservatives, Stephen Doughty for Labour, Daniel Williams for Plaid Cymru, Robin Hunter-Clarke is here for UKIP, and William Powell is here for the Liberal Democrats. I want to get your reaction, each of you, to the poll. I'm banning the phrase, the only poll that matters is the one on June the 8th. So, Bill Powell, your thoughts? Well,
I think, given the nature of the first poll of this campaign, it's perhaps not surprising that at this juncture we see a movement across from the Conservatives, because we've got to remember the last time that the Conservatives had untrammelled power across this country back in 1983 and then to a lesser extent 1987. The impact of that Conservative rule in Wales, it started with the decimation of the mining communities, it ended with the poll tax. So what's that got to do with this particular poll? Well, I believe that at this stage in the campaign, particularly when some of our parties haven't as yet launched our Welsh manifesto, it's natural that there should be that move across. It's been quite common, certainly for my own party, not to peak too early in these polls, and I think you're far from peaking, though, aren't you? At this stage, I think that's true, but I think we will surprise people when polling day comes. You're chuckling away there, Robin Hunter-Clarke, but first of all, your reaction, and then I'll be cruel.
Well, we're on the up, aren't we? We're on 4% in the last poll. We're on 5% now. This is going to, let me be honest with you, this is going to be a difficult election for UKIP. But, Theresa May is talking very hard on Brexit at the moment, but you'll be under no illusion that she will start to backslide over the coming months, over the coming years in the negotiations. UKIP's time will come. This is going to be a difficult election for UKIP. We've got half the amount of candidates standing, which will inevitably mean our vote is half of what it was last time. Our time will come. In this election, we've got to keep our vote as high as possible. And we have a strong support base throughout Wales, and that's what we've got to keep up. The trouble is, as you've alluded to, people see the reasons that people voted for you previously, they're seeing those in the Conservatives, those reasons, and they are trusting them. So as well as you standing down or standing aside in half the seats, then... Well, that's going on. We're doing that for Labour Brexiteers as well. Kate Hoey and Vauxhall. This isn't just a policy which we've got standing down in Conservative seats. But as I say, this will be a difficult election for UKIP because people are trusting the Conservatives. It will be they will not be trusted after this election. Can you put your hand on heart and say UKIP is not falling apart? It's not falling apart. After this election, we're going to rebuild the party, restructure the party, and we will have a positive future. And I'm behind Paul Nuttall in his leadership. Daniel Williams, your reaction?
Well, clearly disappointing that we've gone down, but there's clearly a squeeze that's happened in terms of the Labour-Conservative tussle and the way it's been reported in the press. The seats that we're targeting, like the seats across the upper valleys, for instance, don't feature the Conservatives. So the poll gives a general impression of what's happening across Wales. But in our particular target seats, I think Plaid Cymru is very much still the alternative, and I still expect us to make some gains.
I'll come back to what you were saying then, but just this idea of a squeeze, are you noticing, I mean, does that chime with what you're hearing back from people on the doorstep, that people are seeing it as a two-party race?
Actually, not particularly in the constituency where I'm standing, no. I haven't noticed that. I'm somewhat surprised, actually, by the poll. But nevertheless, what it does show, and what I am picking up on the door, is that we are looking at a very mobile electorate, and swings can happen pretty quickly, and I'm expecting a few more swings to happen before election day.
So you haven't given up in the face of two-party politics just yet?
Not at all.
OK. Stephen Doughty, reaction?
Well, we didn't run for the hills when we saw the first poll. Welsh Labour gets out there and fights for the things that we believe in. And as Roger Scully said today, we weren't prepared to go gently into the dark night. We wanted to go out there, fight our case, make our case to the public, fight strong local campaigns with strong local candidates who are going to stand up for Wales in Westminster. And I think that's been reflected in the turnaround in the fortunes. However, this is just one poll. And we're very clear that this is a two-horse race in Wales. It's whether you want the Tories walking all over Wales again, or whether you want a strong team of Welsh Labour MPs up there, standing up and holding any government to account. I
should say that a lot of Conservatives privately were finding it a bit difficult to see such a lead the last time. Well, you're amongst friends. You can give us your private view here. Do you think actually seeing such a large lead is dangerous to you as a party because it could lead to complacency?
Well, absolutely not. We're not complacent in any way. Cameron Jones was very, very clear at the start of this campaign. In the UKIP poll, we had a huge mountain to climb, and that's why we got out there fighting, making our case, setting out a positive vision for the future of Wales, and running very strong local campaigns with incredibly hard-working local MPs incumbent in their seats who have delivered a record which I think they can be proud of.
Chris Davis, your reaction to the poll?
Well, this, just as the last one, Adrian, is 1,000 people in the Principality here of Wales, which has 3 million people living in it. So I think let's be sensible about this. It's a poll.
It's a very well-respected poll.
It is a very well-respected poll, but it's a poll. And polls, as we've seen so many times over the last few years, have been terribly wrong.
It does chime with, admittedly, it's a more dramatic headline figure, but it does chime with other polls across the UK that have seen the Conservative lead halve. Something is going on, isn't it? And voters are, at the very least, wobbling.
I think we see the polls go up and down. It isn't very good to see the polls, and I'm afraid the press have helped enormously with this, to say that Theresa May is going to have an absolute clear majority, not just a clear majority, a landslide majority right around the country. I think polls will come back. But I think once people realise that if Labour do go this far ahead, it is Jeremy Corbyn that is leading this country. It's Jeremy Corbyn that's taking us through the Brexit negotiations. I'm sure people will see sense and the polls will change.
All right, OK. Let's have a more detailed look at perhaps some of the reasons. And one of them, I don't know, let's just pluck it out of the air. What about social care? Chris Davis.
A very interesting one to pluck out of the air, Adrian. It's been a very interesting few days, certainly on social care.
When you say interesting?
It's been a very interesting few days. I think the thing to highlight here, really, is we actually have a Prime Minister who's prepared to talk about it. A Prime Minister who understands that there is a problem, and a Prime Minister who is prepared to do something about it. The easy option here would have been, just as other Prime Ministers have done in the past, kick it into the long grass after the election and then bring it up.
Right,
this Prime Minister is honest, and she will deliver and deal with it now.
Maybe, and we will talk about the issue itself, but I cannot let you get away without mentioning the U-turn, because that was definitely a U-turn.
No, it wasn't a U-turn.
It was. It wasn't in your manifesto.
And don't forget, here in Wales, in any case, it doesn't affect it because it's devolved.
But the Welsh Conservatives want to do the same thing, though, don't you?
No, honestly, there was going to be a cap on it. We were talking about further consultation in the Green Paper.
But I don't want to turn this into an interview of Chris Davis, but in your 2016 manifesto, the Welsh Conservatives also said you wanted to protect £100,000 worth of assets. That includes people's houses. It's the same policy, isn't it?
It's a sensible policy.
Okay.
And we know we're not penalising the young. We're realising and accepting the fact that in the next 10 years there's going to be another 2 million people who are over the age of 75, and we have to deal with them. They have to have the right level of care, a proper quality care, and we have to pay for it.
If you're not going to admit it's a U-turn,
I think it's been a disastrous few days for the Conservatives, and I thought it was frankly contemptuous of the Prime Minister to run into Wales today to give largely a speech on a massive U-turn on a policy in England and not even set out a vision for what she and her party want to achieve in Wales. I think that
to be fair, she probably didn't plan to make the U-turn announcement.
But I think it reflects the kind of chaos that the Tories have got themselves into in the last few days. And what a contrast actually here with Wales, where we're spending 6% higher per head of population on NHS and social care together and delayed transfers of care down.
I think this is the most unconservative policy I've seen for a long time coming from the modern day Conservative Party. You know, let's be honest about this. This is a death tax. They want to tax people who have deceased. Their families are not going to be able to inherit the money that they are entitled to. You know, it's immoral, actually, what the Conservative Party are doing. And I predict over the next few weeks the Conservatives are going to lose a lot of votes in Wales, a lot of votes throughout this country. Absolutely. And UKIP will be fighting for pensioners and for the elderly in this election campaign.
I'm inclined to see it actually as a fairly typical Tory policy in that, you know, if you want an example of cold economic calculation that pays no attention to people's actual experience on the ground, then the dementia tax is a perfect example of that.
Okay, Bill Powell.
But the dementia tax is really the Conservative Party unveiling its true face, because it's targeting the most vulnerable. It's quite clearly a situation where we should be looking for using general taxation and not targeting those in most need and the most vulnerable. The Liberal Democrats are committed, as our federal policy already has outlined, to have a penny on income tax, both at the basic, higher and premium rate.
You haven't got a plan for personal contributions, though, have you?
Not at this stage, but we're clearly committed to the principle of general taxation as the route to social care.
If you're going to have a go at Chris Davis, I'll have to come back to you in a minute, because I've got to give him a go, because I'm beginning to feel a bit sorry for him, really, 4 against 1. You can respond to any one of those pieces of criticism: death tax, dementia tax, cruel, immoral.
I think what we've seen is the opposition really hyping this up, and they jumped on an opportunity here. I also think that
Conservative colleagues as well.
I also think what they aren't offering is an alternative, sadly. I think they're all saying, as you just heard from the Liberals, you know, there is no alternative at the moment. And sadly, what we are looking at here is Labour will sort this out, of course, but Labour are promising, it's another wish list on this wonderful letter to Santa that, you know, just hasn't been...
Well, I've been listening to pension after pension on the doorsteps over the last few days who have said exactly the opposite. And when they see this alongside the hit on women pensioners, particularly we're on an all-male panel today, but there's thousands of women across Wales who are losing out as a result of changes in the state pension age, and indeed the taking away of the winter fuel allowance. This is a triple whammy on pensioners across Wales.
It is complicated because it's devolved. We've discussed this already, but so it is relevant to ask what your parties would do in Wales. We know what the situation is, that the Welsh Government has and the cap and not using property as assets. How sustainable is that?
Well, I think it's very sustainable. We've seen an increase in the allowances that we're going to give. We've seen increased investment in social care in Wales. That's why we're seeing delayed transfers of care down. We're seeing them go up in England, and I think that's reflecting a very different approach by Welsh Labour here in Wales.
I'd ask Bill Powell what the Lib Dems would do. Daniel Williams, what would Plaid Cymru do?
Well, I wouldn't trivialise the effect of this policy. I've had experience of dementia in my own family, and the key is early diagnosis, and there are lots of reasons why people don't want to come out with an early diagnosis. What would you do to pay for care? Because your position was that you'd make it free over a period of 10 years. Is that still the case? Would Plaid still make all social care free? Yes, that's still the policy, and to bring health and social care together is the key, to integrate them. We've got a fully costed policy of 1,000 new doctors and 5,000 new nurses.
And how could you pay to make it free? I mean, it's admittedly over 10 years, but that's going to be pricey.
Well, the economic levers that we have for... Yes, I don't have a good answer for that.
All right, OK. Well, I'm sure you can go over your manifesto and we'll come back to it.
Well, there you go. You've just seen there, Plaid haven't got a clue how
at least they've got a manifesto.
Well, our manifesto is coming out on Wednesday. The Welsh manifesto
OK, well, give us a preview. How would you pay for social care?
We are looking, as Patrick O'Flynn has announced today, an insurance-based system to pay for social care.
That's the same as the Conservatives.
People could opt in. No, it's not the same. People could opt in at the age of 50 in order to pay for their social care in later years. That would be a sensible policy and would clear up this mess.
Patrick O'Flynn also said that he'd pay for it by cutting spending on the Barnett formula. So you'd rob Wales of more money to pay for it.
What's not right is that is in a way is that the English taxpayer, for example, with the fuel allowance in Scotland, the Conservative Party is campaigning in Scotland to keep the winter fuel allowance, whereas in England they're going to take that away from people.
Less money
that's
overall.
Wrong.
So there's be less money overall for Wales in order to pay.
No, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. But there has to be some fairness throughout the United Kingdom, and that is what the UKIP is saying.
I think it's time we had a break now. When we come back, we're not letting them get away with it, and we will explore the detail of our poll and whether the parties are getting their tactics right and what's influencing voters as election day draws near. That's in a couple of minutes. Welcome back. If public opinion is shifting as our poll suggests, what exactly is swaying how people intend to vote? Lynn Courtney's been looking both at the headline figures and what lies behind them.
Support for the Labour Party in Wales has bounced back in the last 2 weeks, while the Conservative momentum seems to have gone in reverse. Labour are now on 44%. That's a clear 10-point lead over the Conservatives, with Plaid Cymru trailing in third place with just 9%. That would put Labour on 26 seats, up 1 from the 2015 result, at the expense of the Conservatives, with the other parties remaining the same. Only a single seat is now projected to change from the 2015 result, with Gower reverting to Labour after being narrowly won by the Conservatives last time out.
I think above all this tells us that there is a lot of volatility out there, but although the Conservatives may be pressing them, the Welsh Labour Party are not giving up the fight. Labour have been the dominant party in Wales for a long time, and they're not about to just curl up and die.
Our poll shows that Carwyn Jones is the most popular leader in Wales, ahead of Leanne Wood and Jeremy Corbyn. And Theresa May is liked less than Corbyn, with UKIP's Paul Nuttall the most unpopular.
Jeremy Corbyn is still not doing fantastically well as a party leader, and certainly for a Labour Party leader in Wales, he still polls relatively poorly. But we do see, however, that Carwyn Jones is performing particularly strongly, and this, I think, very much validates the Labour Party in Wales and their decision to make Carwyn Jones front and centre of the Welsh Labour campaign.
When asked what are the 3 most important issues in this election, Brexit came out top, followed by health and the economy. The best party for Brexit was the Conservatives, well ahead of Labour and the Lib Dems. The best party for health, well, Labour are the most trusted party, ahead of the Conservatives, with the others squeezed out of the picture.
So, Chris Davis, we can see from the last 2 slides that why you'd want to make it a Brexit election, but our poll shows that it's not being just a Brexit election.
It's a general election, Adrian, and I think a lot of matters are being discussed. I'm certainly being discussed on the doorstep. But I think what was critical to look at that result there was that Labour allegedly are voting for somebody who's not even standing for Parliament. Carwyn Jones is far more popular than the leader they have. Now, we know Stephen isn't particularly keen on Jeremy Corbyn, and it looks as if the majority of Wales are not keen on Jeremy Corbyn. But they're basing this poll on Carwyn Jones.
OK, well, I'll give Stephen Doughty right to reply on that, but it's fair enough to make more out of Carwyn Jones because he is the leader of the party in Wales. And let me put the opposite to you. Why aren't you making more of your Welsh leader? Look at the way you treat Ruth Davidson in Scotland.
Because this isn't a purely Welsh election. This isn't an Assembly election. This is a
Why
Westminster
do you big up Ruth
election.
Davidson in Scotland?
This is a Westminster election.
But you big up Ruth Davidson in Scotland.
Ruth's a fabulous girl, so is Andrew. Andrew's a fabulous man. But it's Theresa May who'll be leading the country, not Carwyn Jones.
Stephen Doughty?
Well, I think the Tories try and keep Andrew hidden away. I mean, his performance in the ITV Wales leaders debate the other week, he was just simply parroting lines that had been handed in from Conservative central office. And I think people in Wales now expect a distinct Welsh vision of how a team working in Westminster with a team in Cardiff Bay and indeed councils can deliver things for the people of Wales.
Why are you keeping Jeremy Corbyn hidden away?
Well, we haven't. He's been here in Cardiff campaigning alongside Carwyn Jones. And indeed, some of the things that are proving the most popular on the doorstep are indeed the policies, the different direction that we're setting on things like healthcare and education, which actually we're already putting into practice here in Wales.
A lot of your colleagues tell me that on the doorstep, Jeremy Corbyn is proving very difficult for them. Are you telling me, hand on heart, that he's not a problem?
Well, there are people who respond very well to Jeremy, and there are people who don't. It still shows in the polling there that Jeremy is more popular than the UK Conservative leader. The reality is that here, people in Wales expect a Welsh vision. They expect to know how a Welsh Labour team in Westminster is going to work alongside a team in Cardiff Bay. And Welsh Labour's in government here. It'd be very strange if we didn't have Carwyn Jones leading that campaign here in Wales.
Daniel Williams, Plaid Cymru makes a great deal of only having one leader.
Yes.
At the same time, that leaves you weakened because you don't have the levers of power at Westminster.
Well, I'm not sure how many manifestos we're going to see launched, but we have a coherent position. We have one leader, one manifesto, one voice, and we go to Westminster in order to get Wales's voices heard, to defend Wales, to articulate a Welsh voice at Westminster.
But
in a range of issues, the Labour Party are divided, aren't they, in questions of zero-hour contracts, on devolving policing to Wales, even on the government white paper, developed here by Carwyn Jones and Leanne Wood, ignored in London. Okay. So there's a hypocrisy, in a sense, at the heart of the Labour campaign in that sense, whereas we have a coherent voice to London arguing the case for Wales.
Quick right to reply on that. Make it quick.
Well, actually, we've been very clear that we would devolve policing to Wales, and indeed we'd be investing more in police officers here in Wales, so there isn't that difference.
And Daniel Williams, shouldn't you be welcoming the fact that a UK party is seeing its Welsh branch becoming more autonomous?
There's a welcome to that, of course, but who exactly are we voting for in this campaign is the question. When David Wigley and Peter Hain put forward a measure in the House of Lords on supporting access to the single market, the Labour front bench whipped their members to stand against it. So, there's a message from Wales that's been contradicted by their own party in London, and surely that's unsustainable.
Robin Hunter-Clarke, do you get that same confusion? People aren't sure whether Paul Nuttall's the leader, Neil Hamilton's the leader. Neither are very popular.
I think everybody knows that Paul Nuttall is our leader. He's doing a fine job. He's got 60% of the membership of the party behind him, and he's doing a sound job. He will lead us after this election.
Extremely unpopolar in our poll. In fact, Neil Hamilton is even more unpopular.
We're not polling particularly high, are we? So that would suggest that our leaders are not going to poll high either. However, after this election, as I've already said, we will be restructuring the party. We will be fighting every by-election that comes up very hard, and I think you'll see UKIP back in force in the very near future.
Do you agree with Paul Nuttall that it doesn't really matter how many MPs you have?
Well, as Paul has said, we actually got David Cameron to give us a referendum on the European Union without having any MPs in Parliament. I think that's probably quite a big achievement.
So it doesn't matter if you don't have any MPs?
At this election, I don't think it will matter if we don't have any MPs after the 2017 election, but we will have MPs. I can pretty much guarantee it by 2022.
OK. Bill Powell, is your opposition to Brexit, is that backfiring?
I don't think it's backfiring. I think it's an issue that electors are increasingly coming to understand, and it's a unique part of what we are offering in this general election, because
you've been very clear about it, but the polling seems to suggest that people are accepting that you're being very clear about it and thinking, OK, well, we're rejecting that message.
Well, the message that I've been picking up on the doorstep, particularly across various seats in Mid and West Wales in last few weeks, is that business people, particularly farmers and other rural businesses, are very troubled indeed by what a headlong rush to hard Brexit will mean for them in the years to come. And I believe that our policy of having a ratification referendum is the right way to go. And I think there's an increasing level of support for that, and we'll see that in the coming 18 days. OK,
Stephen Doughty, I just want to pick up one thing with you, which is that Len McCluskey said that 200 seats would be successful. There's also this report that there's an unofficial target of matching Labour's share of the vote in 2015. Can you tell me that would be success and that 200 seats would be a success?
Well, we never get into discussing targets of numbers or percentages. We've got Welsh Labour candidates. We've got Welsh Labour candidates standing over all over Wales, and we'd expect to want to win all of those seats. Now, the reality is that we had 25 in the last election. The new poll suggesting we might even take the Gower back. I think that would be a real success, but it's far too early to start speculating on numbers.
And one thing I want to clear up with you, there was a report of a conference call that you were all told to focus on the manifesto, not Jeremy Corbyn. Is that true?
we have many planning calls across Welsh Labour in terms of taking decisions about what issues we're campaigning on, how we're going out there. But I have to say we're very, very focused on putting forward our 5 pledges on the NHS, education, housing, the economy.
Let's have some manifesto fun then. I've got to get some payback for having read some of these things. Chris Davis, actually, before we get on to what's in your manifesto, Theresa May today said, gone are the days of devolve and forget. Is that a promise or a threat?
Oh, I'd say it's a promise. I think...
To interfere more?
No. I think everything she says, people will be glad that she's getting involved in. And I think she's very popular on the doorstep. And she'd be good for Wales for the future.
So let
she's
me
been
just
here more than any other leader, don't forget.
Polls don't show that.
Don't forget she's been here more than any other leader. She's showing her commitment to
And her
Wales.
polling's gone down.
Let me just get clarification on this then. What does devolve and forget mean? Sorry, the days of devolve and forget are gone. What does that mean? Does that mean that in areas such as health, education, the economy, actually you'll start seeing the UK government interfering more?
I think what it clearly means is that there has been more devolvement to Wales. More laws have been coming down here. More rules and regulations are coming here to allow the Welsh Assembly to look after. But what she's not forgetting is she's supporting. I'd rather see the word support, because Westminster are supporting the Welsh Government, are supporting Wales.
It's a record of interference. We've seen the UK Tory government taking the Welsh government to court, to the Supreme Court, wasting taxpayers' money, trying to rule out laws that were brought in to protect, for example, agricultural workers here in Wales.
What I'm hearing regularly is that the people of Wales are very, very keen for Westminster to actually be involved, because they are concerned about where Wales are going here under Welsh Labour. And not just Welsh Labour under Carwyn Jones with the Liberals.
Daniel Williams, are you enthused by this idea of Westminster? I'll use the word interference, you didn't, but interference?
Yeah, clearly not. And to redeem myself from the other question, I mean, the big danger for Wales is that the powers coming back to Britain post-Brexit, the powers coming to the UK are centred in London and are not devolved back to Cardiff. There are opportunities from Brexit, such as the setting of sub-state taxes, for instance. So we could, for instance, have control over VAT in Wales. We could lower the VAT, say, on hotels, so turbocharging the Welsh tourist industry as a result of that. Corporation tax is another example where we could actually create a Welsh economy post-Brexit. But if all that's centred in London, then we're missing out on that opportunity.
All right, OK, Robin Hunter-Clarke, you must like this must be music to your ears.
Well, UKIP is very relaxed about the devolution of powers from the European Union once we leave. And we would be in favour of Wales having its own agricultural policy, having its own taxation powers. Neil Hamilton in the Assembly has spoken out very much about that.
And Bill Powell, if the days of devolve and forget are gone, is that a good thing?
I'm very concerned indeed about it, because the Welsh Liberal Party and the Liberal Democrats today have always been the party of home rule, and we see a real danger of a clawback of powers by Theresa May, and particularly in the so-called Great Repeal Bill. We see a real danger if we have a substantial majority of nodding dogs, as they could be called, in terms of a substantial Conservative backbench nodding things through. We see through the Henry VIII powers and other things that she's threatening to use, a wholesale pullback of powers that properly belong here. And I know that leaders of industry, and particularly in the farming sector, the FUW and FU, have real concerns about this in the time to come.
Absolutely. Did you want to come back on any of this? You don't have to. We're very, very relaxed here on this
I'd be delighted, Adrian, because I think the biggest concern to the general public, to the farming unions and to anybody out there is to have yet another referendum on a deal that will be struck over the next 2 years. I think this would throw the economy, it would throw the country into complete turmoil. So to actually keep on going on about another referendum is bad for this country, and it'll be bad for the deal for this country.
OK, well, thank you all very much. We've got plenty of time to talk about manifestos, so we've got more manifesto merriness to come. We have to take another break, though, now, when we'll pick up the discussion when we come back, and we'll also take some time to reflect on the politics and career of Rhodri Morgan. See you in a minute. Welcome back. Now, where were we? Well, actually, where we were was everybody was criticising the Conservative manifesto. Let's be equal opportunities. Stephen Doughty, the Welsh manifesto promises £1.5 billion extra a year for Wales. which must be welcome to most people, but that's at the cost of the UK's economy because you'll be borrowing so much more, won't you?
Well, Karen's made very clear that if you borrow to invest and invest in things like infrastructure and actually growing the economy and generating wealth, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And we've set out very clearly in the Welsh Manifesto today that we, for example, want to get on with things like North Wales rail electrification. We want to stop the prevarication that's been going on with the Tories over tidal lagoons, the new Wilfa Newydd project, many key infrastructure projects for Wales we want to see going ahead.
You do that at the expense of paying off the deficit, dealing with the debt?
No, because what the Tories have done is have years and years of austerity and cuts rather than investing in infrastructure. We've seen in Wales continuing, for example, building new schools and new hospitals, building that critical new infrastructure. We've got more plans for that, which can actually generate wealth, actually grow the economy. What the Tories have done is actually borrow more in 7 years than Labour did in 13 years in government.
Well, I was going to call you the Progressive Alliance, but I'm from, some of you will find that an insult, I'm sure. But on that side of the debate, do you welcome the change in emphasis in Labour's manifesto at a Welsh level and a UK level? Daniel Williams, is it? I mean, there's certainly popular policies. A lot of your members would like similar policies, wouldn't they?
Well, the emphasis on the tidal lagoon and electrification of the train line, of course, are things that we very much welcome. Unfortunately, of course, Labour have stagnated on these things. They've been promised for a very long time. Likewise, the development of some of our town centres and so forth. There's a sense in which the Welsh economy has stagnated in recent years. What we have to do is make sure that the monies promised to us post-Brexit come to Wales. But also, as I said, the levers for the various taxation powers that we could potentially have in Wales to develop our own economy and therefore to safeguard us, in a sense, against the loss of our financial capabilities.
Robin Hunter-Clarke, I mean, it certainly seems a lot of the policies, the UK policies, certainly renationalisation, very popular.
Well, we all know what happened last time Labour were in charge of the country. You know, they near bankrupted us. And what UKIP is focusing on in this election is the fact that once we leave the European Union, we are going to get all this extra money come back to Westminster. And Westminster, indeed, it will be up to the government whether that money does go into the NHS or not. I very much hope it does. And that will be up to a Conservative government. Let's be under no illusion. Theresa May will be Prime Minister after June the 8th. UKIP is also focusing on some of the money we give in foreign aid. A lot of that is not going to the places it should be. And we're on about, looking after our own people first and foremost. Of course, we must help those around the world, but the money has to be going to the right places.
All right. I want to stick to the, you haven't published your manifesto yet, and you haven't published your Welsh manifesto yet. Do you acknowledge the point that I'm making, though, that a lot of the policies in there seem to be very popular? Perhaps that's behind the poll. So.
I mean, there's a degree of common ground, certainly, between my party and Stephen's in terms of infrastructure spend. We are particularly committed to developing the green economy, to have an end to the appalling prevarication over the Swansea Bay tidal lagoon. And let's be real about this. It's not just the Swansea Bay lagoon, but it's the whole series of lagoons around Wales that could help to secure our energy future for the coming decades. And that's going to be increasingly important.
Stephen Doughty, it seems like you've got a few supporters here.
Well, it's good to have that support because I think actually when you're talking about critical national infrastructure and sort of decades-long projects, you need to have a degree of political consensus on those issues, and I think that's welcome to have that support, particularly from Plaid and from the Lib Dems.
But once again, the key to Welsh jobs is access to the single market, as spelled out in the government white paper from Wales.
Which is exactly what we've all agreed on.
But a document ignored largely by the British Labour Party, no?
But Karen, put that document forward. It was supported by Plaid, supported by the Lib Dems. It's something I endorse, and absolutely securing that access to the single market and indeed that funding settlement for Wales. We've repeatedly asked the Tories in Westminster to guarantee that Wales won't be left worse off. The Prime Minister dodged the question yet again today. We still don't have any answers.
Okay. Well, maybe not answers. I mean, you've had a lot of thrown at you tonight, so perhaps you can get some of your own back.
Well, what we've seen with Labour today for tuition fees, for example, nobody is going to say...
Don't worry about my paper.
...that they want to pay for sweets being given away free in a sweet shop, which is basically what Labour do. Which is what Labour... Well, it probably will be tomorrow with Labour, because they're spending a fortune. It's not accountable. Evidently, Diane Abbott is in charge of the books there in the Labour Party, because clearly they're giving away day in, day out, and somebody has to pay for it. It's the British public that will pay. And my goodness me, as quite rightly stated, when you look at the last time Labour were in charge, it's taken us 7 years to claw back from the position that we were in.
This is a constant fallacy reiterated by the Tories, this idea that Labour somehow spent all this money. The reality is that we were actually bringing down the deficit when we left office under Gordon Brown. The reality is that Conservatives have borrowed more in those 7 years than we borrowed in 13.
But the reality is, Stephen, that every day Jeremy Corbyn, who's in charge of the Labour Party, is giving away billions every day, unaccountable.
But Chris, it's your party that's leading us to a headlong rush to hard Brexit, which it's widely acknowledged will absolutely trash the economy of this country unless we build in the safeguards that economists across the piece and businesses, more importantly, regard as vital. Well, I've never seen such a headlong rush in this direction
Sadly, I disagree with William there, because it's William who constantly going on the negative, or the Liberals, or because you're not standing for Parliament, of course, but, you know, on the negative aim constantly. You should be talking up Britain, because we have a fabulous opportunity. We are in Europe at the moment. We're negotiating to come out, not to go in. It's very, very different. But then, they want to negotiate with us. They want to deal with us.
But then, Chris, why repeatedly have the Tories refused to guarantee funding for Wales on the same levels as we've got under the European Union? There are universities in Cardiff that are leading the world in terms of biotechnological research and other research collaboration, and they do not know whether they're going to be getting that funding post-2020. And we've repeatedly asked the Tories and have been left wanting.
Chris, you had an opportunity on that, and also on securing the future of EU citizens who've been living and working and paying tax in this country for
we agree
decades.
with you on that bit.
But I'd ask the same. I'd ask the Liberals to look at those who are living in Europe at the moment. We need to safeguard everybody, not just those that are here. We have to look after the ones who are in Europe as well.
I've had a long day. I was quite happy to let you all go for a little while then. But I do, in terms of looking at manifestos, Daniel Williams-Plaid's manifesto has a few interesting policies. £7.5 billion for an infrastructure fund. How would that be paid? Would that be extra borrowing in a similar way to the Labour Party, or would that come from some other form?
No, it would. But the key is that we secure for us the money that's been promised to us coming back out of Europe. But I also think that, you know, we shouldn't talk the Welsh economy itself down. We do have the potential to build a proper economy in Wales if we have the powers to do so. And that does mean that we talk up the potential of Wales as a self-governing nation.
I was also interested in your idea of an energy company, a nationalised energy company, I suppose. But I'm not quite clear how that would work. Would that effectively nationalise the energy companies in Wales?
It would safeguard our energy capability. It would avoid a race to the bottom in terms of competition on energy. We're also suggesting a bank as well to underpin the Welsh economy, a publicly owned bank.
What would happen to people whose providers are from elsewhere in the UK, though? Would that cause confusion?
Well, no more confusion than in the case of any other devolved matter. You know, we've got to think about the framing in terms of Wales. I don't see that would be a confusion in that sense. The centre would be in Wales.
OK. I'm trying to build some common ground here. You were nodding there, Stephen Doty.
Well, we've said very clearly that we want to see a different energy market here in the UK. It's been failing customers for too long.
So would you look at Plaid's idea?
Well, we've taken a different approach here in Wales, as Plaid, I'm sure, will recognise. On water, for example, we've got a not-for-profit mutual running things. There's and
that's the idea, I think, isn't it, Daniel Williams?
Those are things that have great interest to me.
That's a similar idea, I gather, is that?
Yes, as a basis, exactly, for building up the Welsh economy.
There are different ways of doing things.
It was striking, actually, that the Tory manifesto didn't mention, say, the lagoon or the electrification of the
there's common ground there. Common ground over here.
Another issue that's really important is the localisation of the grids to ensure that community energy projects have got the growth capacity that they need to actually deliver for the future.
So do you like this idea of a nationalised energy company?
I think it's interesting, and I think we could certainly have the basis of a policy there, but I don't want to give away anything too much ahead of Friday.
This is, again, the place where Plaid's single manifesto and single leader comes into its own, because we are taking our policies then to Westminster and making a case for them.
Why won't you give us any previews of your policy? Come on, it's late at night, nobody minds.
It's above our pay grade, Adrian, you know?
There must be something. you must be able to give us something from
something on energy. We want to scrap green taxes, which will take sort of £300 off the average energy bill in Wales. That's something that UKIP will be pushing for in this election.
I wish you'd told me that at the beginning. We could have spent the whole programme watching that. Quick word, Stephen Doughty. I asked the others about the popularity of some of these policies, and it seems Jeremy Corbyn's popularity. You have been sceptical about Jeremy Corbyn. Are you coming round to the idea that he might be the man to lead you into Parliament?
Well, I think the policies are very popular. You know, as I said before, you know, Jeremy is very popular with some people and less popular with others. But in the end, people are looking at what a Labour government would set out, and on NHS, on education, they're clearly saying they like that vision that we're setting out in the UK and here in Wales.
So you're not changing your mind on him?
I get on perfectly well with Jeremy, and you know, he's got lots of admirable qualities. I've been clear where I disagree with him, but actually on healthcare, on education, on climate change, on a fairer economy, we're all united.
Thank you very much.
Contracts and.
Well, I've repeatedly voted against zero-hour contracts, so was one of the people who put forward amendments on them.
There is a contradiction.
Well, we'll end on a contradiction. We've had all that disagreement because we're going to put the election on pause, as indeed was the case when campaigning in Wales was suspended on Thursday, and we all took some time to reflect on the passing of Rhodri Morgan. The man who was our First Minister for nearly 10 years was an extraordinary politician who defied attempts to pigeonhole him. Just a few weeks ago, I know this sounds unlikely, but I visited him at home to cook, eat and talk politics for a future episode of Welsh Bites. In what turned out to be his last interview, Rhodri Morgan gave me his own view on where his political journey had taken him.
It has made me a passionate devolutionist. And when I look up at what's happening in Scotland now, you know, I often feel that one of the problems has been that people define themselves as either nationalists or unionists, you know, and I would never describe myself as a unionist because the unionists were the people who were against devolution in the first place. Whereas, you know, if you're a nationalist, obviously you don't believe in devolution because you think it doesn't go far enough and you want to become a completely different country. But it's this, trying to define this space of being passionate about devolution, not seeing it as a halfway house to independence or anything that's been conceded to the nationalists because otherwise there'd be problems. It's a way of, it's actually a belief that the British Constitution is much healthier for having devolution since 1999.
So it's an end in itself rather
than an end in itself, yeah.
Sometimes I think I've got a very strange and extraordinary and very privileged job. Let's have a think about what Rhodri Morgan's political legacy is. Daniel Williams, you heard him then talking about devolution as an end in itself. You disagree with that, but you can't deny that Rhodri Morgan carved out this idea of somewhere in between nationalism and unionism, as he put it.
That's true. I got to know Rhodri quite well in the last couple of years as Chancellor of Swansea University, where I'm Professor, and we went out to America together. He gave a keynote speech at a conference on Wales in Harvard that I organised last year. A very warm character, and we discussed some of these issues. Of course, any movement needs an aim, needs a vision of where it's heading, and I don't agree that devolution is an end in itself. Rhodri's legacy, in a sense, depends on what happens after him, and there's a real danger that the foundations he laid are now stagnating in Wales. We need a vision of where we're going forward, and I think to some extent he felt that as well. And Mike Sullivan, one of his main advisors, of course, moved from Labour to Plaid Cymru last year for that precise reason, that he felt that we need a drive now, we need to have more confidence developing Wales onwards, building on the foundations that Rhodri laid.
I think I'm pretty safe saying you'd never have got Rhodri Morgan to cross over to Plaid Cymru, but
well, he described himself as, if you cut me in half, I'd be half Plaid and half Labour, is what he said, which reflected his own family to some extent.
Stephen Doughty, obviously, I mean, you knew Rhodri Morgan very well, and you knew him as a person as well, and as well as the politics. I once asked him, was there any such thing as Morganism? And he just laughed. I suppose that's quite about as close as you get to it, isn't it? It was, whether you call it clear red water or something else. Was it a sustainable position, though, or was it, as Daniel suggests, something that might need to develop?
I think it was a sustainable position, and I think it was a popular position, and I think it reflects in some ways where we find ourselves in Welsh politics today. I mean, what you saw in that clip there, Adrian, was Rhodri at his best. You know, a fearsome intellect, a kindness, and a passion for Wales and the country in which he made such a huge difference. And you know, he's clearly going to go down in history as one of the greats of Welsh politics and indeed of Welsh history. And as a personal friend, as someone I knew since I was probably about 8 years old. You know, he was an incredible inspiration, and I think as somebody said last week, you know, he was unusual in Welsh political figures, and indeed all political figures, that he was more popular at the end of his time in office than at the start, and that's saying something, and I think reflects his appeal, which went well beyond just the Labour Party, but actually into a very positive and optimistic vision of Wales and where it could go in the future.
Robin Hunter-Clarke, you weren't in the Assembly at the time that
No.
Rhodri Morgan was.
No, but I met him last year during the Assembly election campaign in Ammanford when he was interviewing Neil Hamilton, actually.
You and Neil Hamilton are probably polar opposites.
Oh, well, maybe. But what struck
Rhodri
me about Rhodri when I met him was he was a very humble man and somebody, you know, that is obviously well respected in Wales. So it was a real privilege meeting him, and he's obviously, you know, it's going to be a great loss to this country, actually.
Bill Powell, did you know?
I knew Rhodri increasingly over the last few years, particularly having become a good friend and colleague of Julie. And I think it's very important to remember what Julie and Rhodri as partners also delivered for Wales in so many different ways. And one of the special things about Rhodri was the fact that he could reach out well beyond the tribe of which he was a member. And we saw that during the partnership government and his loyalty working with Mike German and Jenny Randerson, but also latterly during the One Wales government. And it's that, as well as being a real champion for Home Rule, alongside people like the late Richard Livesey, David Wigley, people who transcend politics.
He could do that, Chris Davis, couldn't he? He could reach out across parties and work with parties whilst remaining fiercely a Labour politician and believing in that side of things. Did you find that?
Certainly, and you know, those within our party respected him enormously. Of course, we didn't agree with him on every matter, but we certainly respected him. I had more to do with him when he was Chancellor of Swansea University and sitting on the court and attending the meetings there. And again, you know, he handled everything so well. And we have to remember as well, and have great respect for him, he wasn't the favourite to be First Minister, and he tried several times to get there, but he took on his own party and got where he did, and then ruled the Welsh Assembly for 10 years. He deserves all our respect.
Should there be some sort of memorial in the last minute or so? Stephen Doughty? I don't necessarily mean a statue, but should there be...
No, absolutely. I mean, I have no doubt that people will memorialise Rhodri in ways that I think are appropriate to the causes and the communities that he stood with. And it's not to forget, he supported a great many voluntary organisations. He was a passionate European. He was a passionate internationalist. And I think, and obviously his record in the academic sphere, and I think people will choose to memorialise him in many ways, which I think will be longer lasting than a physical memorial.
In an era of fake news and distrust of experts, Rhodri did believe in experts. He did believe in the academic world.
From
and
a
did
very
turn
academic
to it.
background.
Yeah,
and he was somebody who
absolutely.
was genuinely authentic. I think that's the important thing to remember.
This quick word on the idea of a memorial. Good idea, bad idea, Daniel?
Sure, I'm not great at memorials. I think the real memorial would be to take his example and inform our politics with expert advice and insights.
Good words to end. Expert advice and insight is what we've just had for the last hour. Maybe. Thank you very much. That's it for tonight. Sharp End is back, not next Monday, next Tuesday at 10:50. Until then, thanks to my guests. Thank you for watching, and good night.